Growing Up Weird.
Hi, and welcome to Growing Up Weird, the podcast where we explore how the earliest chapters of Western childhoods shape the health stories that we then carry into our adulthoods. I'm Dr. Greg Dickens, scientist and consultant in medical innovation, and I am here with Dr. Gwen Bradbury.
Hello.
Who is a healthcare researcher, author, and your guide through the science stories and traditional strategies that connect childhood beginnings to lifelong good health. Each week, we dig into the newest evidence, understand how it links together, and walk through some of the changes that we in the West could make to give kids decades of better health. So, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a healthcare professional, or simply curious about how the body and brain develop over time, you're in the right place. Are you ready? Have you got a cup of tea? Good. We begin, as ever, with the news. Gwen, what is your news?
Well, Greg, have you ever asked yourself the question, a paper title coming up, do children who are preschool picky eaters eat different foods at school lunch when aged 13 years than their non-picky peers?
Not in those exact terms. Not in those exact terms. Tell me, should I have?
Well, some researchers, Kemp et al., publishing in the Journal of Human Nutrition and Dietetics, set out to answer that exact question and then titled the paper that exact question.
Do children who used to be picky eaters eat different things at their school lunches than their non-previously picky 13-year-old mates?
Oh, that's pretty close.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You even got the age 13 years, which I think was a real key part of that
I was
title.
paying attention.
Well, if you, like my colleague, think a lot about Betteridge's law of headlines, which says that if a headline is a question, it's almost always answered by the word no, then actually this one is going to surprise you because the answer to that question was yes. But let me just tell you a little bit more about the study because I thought it was a really interesting one. They took about 7,500 children in the southwest UK and they got their parents to answer a questionnaire when the kids were aged 3, and on the basis of that they classified those children into not picky eaters, low picky eaters or high picky eaters, and then they asked the children 9 years later what they typically ate for school lunches. So they kept like a food diary and then sent a questionnaire back. And what's really interesting is a lot of studies have looked at how picky eating in young children persists into adolescence and adulthood, but a lot of those rely on the parents to report what those children are eating.
Interesting.
And they look at the food that's consumed in the house, which is when parents have quite a big role in what their children eat.
Nice.
Whereas this one said, okay, given what we know, let's look at what these children are choosing to eat at school and how does that differ.
But they are looking at self-reported eating.
They are, and that's obviously going to be a limitation of this study, as with basically everything that relies on food frequency questionnaires.
Fair.
So what they found, there are a few interesting pieces really. So when they categorised these preschoolers, they found that about 26% of those children were classified as not picky eaters, around 60% were classified as low picky eaters, and around 15% were high picky eaters. So, 3/4 of the children were picky eaters in some form or another. But they looked at what was associated with children being high picky eaters, and the factors were high maternal educational attainment, lower maternal BMI, and being a firstborn child. So I found that quite an interesting.
That's interesting.
Set of
and
associations.
The firstborn child thing rules in only children, I'd bet.
Oh yeah, that is true. That is another point.
Because it starts to paint quite a stereotypical picture there, doesn't it?
It does paint, yeah, it absolutely does. But what I thought was particularly interesting here was that they looked at these kids, these 3-year-old kids, and looked in adolescence. And unsurprisingly, which is what has been found in a lot of studies, the picky eating younger children are likely to be picky eating adolescents. The behaviour does decline a bit, but actually a lot of those food behaviours still persist. When they looked at these kids choosing food or having school lunches or having packed lunches, only 1/4 of children were having cooked vegetables, salad and fruit if they had any sort of choice over it at all, which is very low. So actually one of the major messages was that, my goodness, adolescents are basically eating no plants. But when they looked at picky eaters, so they just looked at that group and they said, okay, what are they eating in their packed lunches and what are they eating in their school lunches, and how does that compare to the whole group? They found that picky eaters, if they had packed lunches, they were likely to not eat much meat, fish, dairy or vegetables and fruit. But if they were eating school lunches, they were only less likely to eat dairy, vegetables and fruit. So basically, kids who were eating a school lunch were having a slightly more diverse nutrition at school if they had the choice of having a school lunch rather than having lunch that was sent from home.
That list of things that they avoid if they're sent from home is all foods.
It's basically all foods, isn't it? I know, it's really sad. I was like, okay. Whoa. But they did at least say that the kids who were having school lunches, with whether it's peer pressure, whether it is a little bit more autonomy of a food choice, were ending up eating meals that were slightly more nutritionally balanced than if they were having packed lunches. And I found that quite interesting because I kind of think, there's so much like stuff about school lunches generally and about the dodgy nutrition and the poor quality, etc. It was quite useful to have a study that said actually these may be still helping children to have a more diverse diet when they're 13 than having a packed lunch from home.
That's really interesting. And for me, counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. There's the whole, I'll pack the kids what I know they like because I know them, it's personalised, they are more likely to eat it than any old stuff they get at school. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking about that as a parent. I should be thinking about it as a primatologist, right? Or a veterinary surgeon, because both of those two trainings say that if mammals watch other mammals eat stuff, they are more likely to eat it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's famous, the studies in rats, in monkeys. If rats or monkeys watch somebody or another rat or monkey eat a thing and then be very sick, they'll never go near it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they watch another rat or monkey, depending on whether they're rats or monkeys, I don't think it works cross species, watch a conspecific eat a thing and they're fine, they are then more likely to eat it. So of course kids are more likely to eat school lunches because they got 100 test subjects all around them checking for poison. Yeah,
exactly. And if we think about the Japan, which has got really low rates of picky eatings, one of the absolute cornerstones of how they help children to develop normal, balanced, nutritious dietary habits is around having mandated school lunches without choice.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting.
Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. May I tell you some news?
Yes, please. What have you got today?
Well, I've got two things. One is some news that I don't want to share with you, and one is some news that I do want to share with you.
Okay.
The one I don't want to share with you is that paper that everybody's talking about, the Marcos Diaz Gay et al. Paper that was in Nature. The colibactin in childhood increases your likelihood of bowel cancer paper. Mm-hmm. Folks, if you haven't seen this yet, it's worth a read. Go and read it on the BBC and the Guardian and the Times, wherever it was everywhere about 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. The reason I don't want to share this is not because it's not fascinating science. It absolutely is. The idea that exposure to colibactin, which is a bacterially produced toxin, in childhood makes you much more likely to have early onset, slightly weird bowel cancer, which is potentially the reason that we now have 2.5 times the rate of early onset bowel cancer that we had just 25, 30 years ago. That's fascinating. But the reason I don't want to share it is that A, everybody else has already talked about it. So, I'm going to be vain here and say, well, they've done it. I don't have to. And the other one is that we don't yet know where that colibactin's coming from. We don't yet know why it's in certain country cohorts and not in others. Why there are spiking rates in Argentina. Is it beef in childhood? We don't know. If it is, why isn't it in other heavy meat eating countries? So I'm going to say, watch this space, find out where this colibactin in childhood is coming from, wait for other papers to confirm that it is what's causing these weird mutations, and then absolutely we need to change what's going on.
Antibiotics? I try to think all of them.
Could be. Is it increased antibiotics mixed with high inflammatory system and processed meat? I don't know. Could be. Not sure. I'm not going to raise the alarm on this until I know what I'm raising it about.
God, fascinating. Oh,
So,
bowel cancer is awful.
yeah, really, truly horrible. And a lot of these are being caught much later because they're in younger people who aren't being screened yet. That's going to change too. Anyway, I will raise that when it becomes something we can do something about.
Yeah, sounds good.
The news that I do want to talk about, however, is in the current issue of Science, written by Vanya Karbik et al., and it's about thetis cells. Have we come across thetis cells?
No, I've never heard of these. How do you even spell it?
Thetis. Thetis. Thetis.
Thetis. Okay, all right. Tell me about thetis cells.
Thetis. These are my thetis
Thetis.
cells. I don't know how you say it, but it's
Okay.
spelt like that. They are a type of antigen-presenting cell. Now, for listeners, you won't have seen Gwen's face just light up, but it did. They were discovered in the late 20-teens. They haven't been known about for long. There was an interesting paper in 2022 saying...
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
What is an antigen presenting cells for the people who are listening?
I'm getting
You're getting
to
there,
it. I'm
all right?
getting to
Suddenly, it's this thing. I'm going to just go jump in.
Chuck it
Don't
out.
worry, folks.
We all know APCs.
Yeah,
That's
don't worry,
fine.
folks. He's going to get into it in a moment.
First talked about seriously in 2022.
Okay.
When people said, these might be what's causing tolerance, allergenic tolerance. So, let's go back to the beginning. When you have an immune system, which most of us do, there are cells that pick up stuff and show it to the immune system. Those cells are called antigen-presenting cells. They pick up bits of stuff they find lying around in the blood or in the lymph or coming through mucous membranes, and they say, hey, immune system, come and have a look at this. The stuff that they pick up is called antigens, and they are cells, so they are antigen-presenting cells. There's your APC.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Good. Very clear.
Glad I can explain that. Immune cells, normally T cells, come along and have a look. Well, they don't. They see if their cellular receptor fits this thing that's being held up. And then B cells do it, and macrophages do it, and all sorts of other cells do it. But it's the cells that hold it up originally. They hold it up and they hold up other messaging molecules. So they're holding up a thing and saying, this is what I found, and here are the messaging molecules that say how you need to understand this thing that I'm holding up. Thetis cells, when they hold up a thing, also hold up a learn not to react to this signal.
Okay.
So it was postulated in 2022 that maybe these are the core of tolerance, and it has been shown in mouse models that if thetis cells get hold of an antigen, say peanut antigen, the immune system is 8 times less likely to then react to that antigen.
Wow. Okay. That's big,
Yeah.
right?
As a biological effect,
Yeah,
that's
that's
big, right?
massive. Yeah.
So they went, okay, let's have another look at these cells. And that study is now being reported, and it's made it into Science because it is important. 2 major findings. One is that this wave of thetis cells is only in the very early gut. In mouse models, that's in the first couple of weeks.
Wow.
And then they go dormant.
Wow. Okay.
Well, they don't necessarily go dormant. There are many, many fewer of them. 2, they are really only very, very active in the gut lymph nodes. So, if these antigens are getting into your system in another way, say through your skin, they don't get to thetis cells.
Okay,
they get to a whole bunch of other antigen-presenting cells, which don't have the same message when showing the immune system stuff they've found. They may well say, try not to react to this, but they won't say it in the same way that thetis cells do. They might not have the same tolerizing effect. So, A, this paper shows they are very, very active early on in life. Also shows they are basically only really found in gut lymph nodes.
Can I ask, early
Absolutely.
in life from birth or slightly after birth?
Okay, there are 2 limitations to this paper.
Okay.
One is that it doesn't give a good time resolution for what's going on early.
In mouse studies, right? So
And that's the other limitation. This is in mouse studies. But in 2 earlier papers, they have now shown that mouse studies and human effect for thetis cells have been the same on all the vectors they've checked.
Interesting.
So an early mammalian cell looks like it behaves the same in mice and people, and mouse studies are now showing early in life and just in the gut, which is exactly what we would expect if we're looking for the tolerizing effect that allows people to become less likely to be allergic to stuff if they eat it early in life, which is precisely the epidemiological effect that we see in human beings.
Almost always, but...
Almost always, unless it's very, very, very early.
Cow's milk protein allergy.
Cow's milk protein allergy.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you're anticipating that, because I'm thinking, I've seen papers where even just a couple of episodes of formula in that first day or two is enough to radically alter your risk of later infanthood.
And that's why I wish this paper looked at really, really, really early. Are these thetis cells becoming active in the first couple of days? Mice and humans are on such different timescales.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, it's true.
It's not in the paper.
Okay, no problem. I'm glad you thought about that as well, Greg, because clearly,
that is the what is the word for it? Contradiction.
It's a contradiction.
The contradiction yet to be solved here is, why is it that feeding antigens to babies early makes them less likely to be allergic to basically everything, apart from if it's really, really early in the first couple of days? What's going on there? We still don't know.
Fascinating.
That was the cool piece of news I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, really cool.
It's nice doing this podcast every 2 weeks now. There's more time for cool news to appear. I've just turned down like 6 interesting papers. Anyway, what is it we're talking about today?
Today, Greg, we're talking about pain in children.
Pain in children. Fascinating. Okay, I have read the article that you wrote recently on pain, and I got to tell you, it made me pretty darn cross, like seething angry. The thing at the beginning, folks, if you haven't read the article, go and read it. It's the first story on what we used to do to babies around pain in the UK, the US, and a few other Western cultures is horrifying. Brace yourself. But I kind of want to know where we're going with this discussion. Where do you want to go here? Is this a discussion about we should not be treating pain?
No, absolutely not. It is not a discussion about not treating pain. Certainly we know from the very story you talked about at the beginning of the article, we know that severe pain that is not treated in children in early life can have enormous effects on that child's later mental and physical health. Because even though a very painful surgery might be a couple of hours, you think a couple of hours in life? No, believe me, it can make an enormous difference. So I'm very, very much in favour of making sure that severe pain, procedural pain, so pain that we're inflicting on a child for some kind of longer term benefit or to fix some injury, those should definitely be treated, and usually with drugs. But the drugs are only part of a pain management solution. In some cases, they are part of the solution with other things as well. And in some places, actually, they're not an important part of the solution. So the other behavioural and non-pharmacological methods are potentially more important.
That's interesting. Okay, I am going to dig into a few of those, or rather encourage you to dig into a few of those in just a second. But the flip side then of that very strong, no, this is not a discussion about not treating pain. Is this a discussion in which we are talking about increasing the amount of pain control? Do you think that we as a culture should be helping people control their pain more than we do nowadays?
Really good question, and actually it depends on the dimension that you're looking at. So, for example, around the world, there are many children who don't receive adequate levels of pain management for very painful procedures, as I've just talked about.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of the medical profession is very much focused on how can we better recognise the pain that we're causing to children, how can we better treat it. So from that perspective, there are lots of areas in which our pain management should be better, and more children should be getting access to good pain relief drugs. But there is also a converse side of it, which is that children throughout childhood experience lots of small pains, what we call everyday pains, which are, bruises, grazes, mild burns, banging the head. To a small extent, before we get into the whole kind of, long-term dementia risk. But there are lots of everyday pains that a child experiences in childhood, and those pains provide an experience framework for the child to be able to compare future pains with. So it kind of gives them a knowledge bank about pains that they've been able to deal with. And it gives them lots of opportunities to think about how they can better deal with and manage their pain so it doesn't become overwhelming. And the reason I was really interested in writing this article is because there are enormous cultural differences in how adults experience pain. What do you know about that?
I know that pain is very often a rite of passage. I know that in cultures where pain is a rite of passage, it takes on a positive connotation and therefore is experienced in other ways, different ways, non-weird ways. I know that pain is very often not an individual experience. There are plenty of cultures where pain is pretty much always shared and worked through as a group. I know that learning to deal with pain is seen as a skill. I kind of want to tell a West African story here. Do you mind if I take a second?
No, do it. I was actually thinking of the big brown wasp story in South America, which we'll talk about.
The big brown wasp story.
No, go on, you do that.
Bloody big brown wasps. I was thinking of a region in Ghana where we went, where I noticed a little bit late, perhaps, because it happened to my son and I was very cross, and perhaps if I'd known what was going on earlier, I wouldn't have been quite so cross and
could have primed him to deal with it,
to understand it. But a region in which it was very common for any old passing adult to deliberately hurt a child, and it wasn't done with malice, it wasn't done out of revenge, it was done because learning to experience and deal with and move past pain is seen as such an important skill that slightly hurting a child, to give them an opportunity to learn, to show them that little pains are fleeting and go past, it was part of the culture there. Had I perhaps briefed my son that this was going to happen, he would have reacted the same way that other kids in the area did, which is to kind of take it, maybe even be slightly grateful. As it was, I saw it very much in a Western view, which is, you don't hurt kids. This is outrageous behaviour. I will not stand for this, and I got quite cross. Cultural differences.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not advocating that you hurt children, but when you have different cultures that have evolved in very different settings, where the ability to tolerate pain might differ and the ability to intervene in pain is different, it's hard to judge. Yeah, I think that's one of the difficulties.
Well, this is what I'm saying here. I judged very quickly. I am still not comfortable with that process nor that approach, but I judged much quicker than perhaps I should have done. So you asked me what I knew about pain and how people relate to it. Yeah. And what I know is that it isn't, people don't all deal with pain in the same way that we are used to. It is not a universal experience.
Well, I was just thinking about, I said about the big brown wasps. Do you remember when we got stung? Well, you got stung on the head.
Do I remember being stung by big brown? Yes.
But do you remember what people said to you?
Congratulations.
Yeah. Why?
Because you have endured this horrendous pain, and that particular species of wasp makes you a better archer. Yeah,
exactly. That's such a great story. I didn't use it in my article, but that is, that has happened, but this is what you gain. I don't feel like that's a particularly common narrative around pain.
Yeah, sure. We, in our cultural taboo of all things uncomfortable, we very rarely equate painful things with being worth it,
stronger or better, or conferring a skill. Because it doesn't really, thing is, again, we're not judging cultures here, but I don't believe that you became a better archer after being stung by the wasp.
But you dare you?
Because you're already so good. Clearly, that's why I'm saying it. But having that little fleeting moment afterwards, where you're like, I haven't been stung by that before, so maybe I'm going to nail that target.
I'd like to point out that shooting fish darts at fish for months, I didn't hit a single bleeding one of them.
Even after the wasp sting?
I didn't know.
Sorry, mate.
I was much better with a bow and arrow, but those little fish darts are useless. Never use fish darts. They suck. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have... Why is it you're asking me about what I know about culture of pain, the understanding of pain?
Because I knew there were big cultural differences, but I don't think I'd really appreciated just how different the experience of pain can be in adulthood, and how different the percentage of people. What was the question? How often do you experience physical pain? And they asked 30 different cultures, and they found that in I think it was Croatia or somewhere that was lowest out of their list of cultures, about 8% of adults said they experienced, a severe physical pain often or very often. And in the US, it was 34%. That magnitude of difference, we're talking, I can't do it off the top of my head, 7 times higher in the population of people experiencing severe physical pain frequently. That's incredibly high. And so I think I was particularly interested in actually looking at what is it that people do differently? What helps? What does the evidence say about helping children to develop beliefs and coping strategies and ability to deal with pain that should help, hopefully, to protect them in adulthood?
Okay. Well, let's go down that road then. What did you find?
So, first off, I found that the vast majority of papers in this area look at how we can better diagnose pain and give pain relief. Unsurprisingly, because the medical profession, unsurprisingly, is focused on severe procedural or surgical pains. Basically, that's not surprising. There wasn't a huge amount of evidence, so I looked at a kind of handful of recent papers. Some of them were excellent, actually, but that looked at what you do, how you talk to children, what you can provide, how you can give them agency to help them deal with their pains and see them actually as part of growth, or as part of something that can be resolved and may even be a skill that they're developing.
Okay, so you're talking about a whole bunch of different ways to deal with pain, to rationalize it. Clearly, those are not skills we massively have here, as evidenced by your enormous number of Americans suffering severe pain. What is the point of pain?
So the point of pain is about learning, about changing behaviour based on your experience. And so that means that in order for us to learn about pain and also learn about how our behaviours affect our likelihood of pain, we need to be experiencing situations that put us at risk of pain.
Interesting. Okay, I think I see where this is going. What experiences put us at risk of pain?
So that is what we talk about when with children. We bucket a lot of different experiences that put children at risk of physical pain as risky play.
Okay, risky play. That's a fashionable term. What does it mean?
So I think I hadn't quite understood that risky play, the risky part, refers to the risk of physical injury. Sounds really obvious, but I don't know, I guess I kind of thought there were some other vague and nebulous risks, because it's not called potentially painful play, is it?
Existential play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I feel like it's a little bit buried in it. But when you unpick it, actually, risky play is play where there is the risk of physical harm, whether that is playing with fire, playing over rivers, playing with sharp objects. All of these things have the potential for physical harm.
Right, and I can see then that during any play where you might experience pain, you remember when we talked about balance and this idea that you have to calibrate your balance sensors by tipping until you fall over. You're not going to learn what your fall over point is if you don't fall over. Mm-hmm. So that's one half of things when calibrating your sensors is reaching your limits. Mm-hmm. And then the flip side of that is then using those calibrated sensors to not go near your limits again, right? And it happens in balance, it happens in calibrating sight and hearing and all of that. But I guess it's the same with learning play? A little bit of a Freudian there. Risky play, that you are learning what causes pain, and you are learning what pain is like. And then on the flip side, once you've done that, you're learning to deal with pain and you're learning to avoid pain. Mm-hmm. So it's this big cyclical thing.
Yeah, I love that. And it actually really reminds me of, our son on the beach chasing ghost crabs. Because he spent...
That was risky play.
That was definitely risky play. We were living on the edge of an island in the Indian Ocean, and there were loads and loads of the fastest land invertebrates, ghost crabs. Oh no!
I hate to say this, solifugids are quicker.
Those are centipede things.
Sun spiders though, some of the really ancient arachnids.
Fine,
but
some very speedy crabs.
Some very speedy crabs.
Some very speedy crabs.
Very speedy.
And he spent ages chasing them, catching them, running up the beach with crabs hanging off his hand, screaming in pain. Get them off, get them off. We get them off, and then we were like, he'll learn.
And what we thought as adults from the West is he'll learn to not catch these crabs. And we were so wrong.
What did he learn?
He learned two things, one of which was how to catch these crabs properly. He learned to be very quick and nimble and to grab them from behind where they can't then get you with their pincers.
Yeah.
But the more impressive thing he learned that I watched was he learned how to handle pain. Because he'd still get pinced every now and again, much less frequently. But he didn't scream anywhere near as loudly.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
He didn't run around like a headless chicken. He was much more focused when he got hurt.
Well, and now I see it a couple of years down the line. He'll show other kids how to pick stinging nettles without getting stung. And again, it is, I mean, there is a 1 in 5 chance that you are going to get stung. But he's found ways to reduce the risk of doing it. But it's quite fun because you might get stung.
Yeah.
And similarly...
but even when he does get stung, he no longer cries about it.
No, exactly.
He just goes, ow.
Yeah.
I got stung.
Yeah.
And it's the two-sided wheel of risky play.
Interesting. I never thought about it like that. He also earlier was catching bees just to show that you could, because then you could open your hands and the bees like fly away. But again, he didn't get stung, so he clearly has. He's been learning. Yeah, he will. And then maybe he actually will learn for once. What do you reckon? Or maybe not.
I think he learns just fine every single time he does any of this, just not in the way that we as traditional Western adults expect.
Very true.
Anyway, okay, we've talked a lot about what pain is, about how various cultures deal with it. What is it that we can do to help kids learn about pain in a way that's going to set them up to have less pain as adults?
Great. Well, I think there are a few pieces here. So we've talked about allowing them to experience enough risk of pain. That's the risky play piece. One thing we haven't mentioned is that inflammation, metabolic syndrome, high sugar consumption, all of these are linked to higher pain sensitivity.
Yep.
So making sure that they build healthy bodies and all the other ways we talk about on this podcast, super important.
To dig into that detail a little bit for anybody listening who's not a world-class inflammation scientist, Guinevere, that does two things. Having a higher inflammatory state not only means that you get more pain from a painful stimulus, it also means that pain is going to last longer. So if you can be in a lower inflammatory state when you get hurt, it's not going to hurt so much. It's not going to hurt for so long. Didn't mean to interrupt. Just
no, that's great. Thank you very much.
If you're going to pick me up on APCs, then I'm going to pick you up on inflammation science.
That's great. We also should be thinking about what are the non-drug ways to deal with pain. So we don't always reach for the paracetamol or the acetaminophen if you're in the US. Those ways include, for young children, breastfeeding is a fantastic analgesic, which is why babies suckle really hard when they've had something painful done to them. Breastfeeding's great, cuddling's great, putting heat or cold, giving placebo treatments. Again, I talked about the stinging nettles. My daughter was telling me that actually if you rub dandelions, not dock leaves, it's much more effective at relieving stings. Who knows whether it is, but for her, profound placebo effect. And also getting children to sleep. Talked a lot about sleep as well on this podcast. Sleep is an amazing analgesic. So thinking about things as sort of non-drug ways to deal with pain, that's one piece. Then the other two pieces are about distracting, so helping children focus on something that other than the pain, and helping them to feel like they can control the pain. Those are kind of the other big pieces. So avoiding focusing, or what are you going to say?
Well, I'm thinking about how these relate to adulthood. Mm-hmm. If the overall drive of this podcast, which it is how can childhood improve adulthood health, then I see that learning about non-drug approaches to pain helps you in adulthood in two ways. One is it preserves pain as a learning experience, and the other one is, I assume, now correct me if I'm wrong, that it helps you get habits and knowledge that you can use to control pain throughout your entire life.
Absolutely. And so there is some evidence, for example, to suggest that parents who model pain behaviours, so model that they are feeling and experiencing a lot of pain, they are likely to pass that increased pain sensitivity onto their children, who are then at higher risk of chronic pain. I know, it's really, really sad, actually. So part of, avoiding focusing on the pain is actually, as adults, demonstrating how you deal with pain in a positive and constructive way. Things like, my body will fix it, or I need to go to sleep and it'll feel better in the morning. All of these kind of positive pieces that adults model help those children, when they become adults, to be somewhat protected against the risk of chronic pain.
Yet another fake it till you make it.
It is fake it till you make it, yeah, absolutely.
Another one of those situations like, oh, I don't really like sugar. Or, there's plenty of them. Oh, I absolutely love going for a walk. It's my favourite thing in the whole world. Just lying to children in a really constructive way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate that there's enough chronic pain going around that is sensible advice.
Yeah, it's true. It is really sad. And the final one is giving children skills to control the pain. So helping them to work out how they can treat injuries on themselves. So giving the tools to cope with that. Teaching them how to help others to deal with pain. So if a friend of theirs gets hurt, or a sibling, help the others to provide things that are going to help that child, because it enables them to use it on themselves. And finally, responding appropriately to their pain, acknowledging it but without rewarding it or reinforcing it. So another piece from that paper I mentioned earlier about this kind of learning of pain into adulthood. Children or adults who have chronic pain and functional gastrointestinal disorders are much more likely to have parents who have rewarded or reinforced the pain. So buying them things, giving them sweets or whatever when they're in pain, sort of rewarding those pain behaviours.
Wow. I'm entirely and utterly confident that not a single one of those parents thought they were rewarding anything.
Yeah, I know.
But it is frustrating that you can be trained to experience certain things without anybody intending to train anybody for anything. Human brains are way too good at picking up patterns.
They really are.
Okay, this is useful. I'm seeing a bunch of things here that you can do in early childhood to help set up a longer pain-free life for that person. Anything you can do after childhood?
So you mentioned rites of passage earlier, and I think that is a really great example of how pain can be a kind of constructive part of the right sort of pain, part of a kind of initiation, part of a ceremony. So one of the things that I'm going to highlight here is actually our birthday walks.
Yeah.
Because so what we do is the children on their birthdays walk a mile for every year of their age. And that is always quite a challenge. They started when they were 2 or so.
They started when they were 1 and they didn't make it.
That's true. But so by the age of 2, if you take it slowly, your child can walk 2 miles. By the age of 8, they can walk 8 miles. But it's still hard. It's a long time. They feel tired. They have discomfort. Maybe they get blister. Maybe they just want to sit down. They're experiencing lots of different types of pain for a longer walk.
Yeah.
And yet that is part of a ceremony. It's got a meal out at the end. It's got family joining in. It is part of a celebration, and it shows that pain and that discomfort can be part of growing and developing.
It's got rite of passage written all over it. Mm-hmm. And you see that as something that you can start at any age.
Yeah.
Because of course you can. And it's something that helps to contextualize pain.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that that works for any sort of pain?
No, I mean, it's going to be specific to endurance and endurance pain rather than cuts, bruises, it's not that generalizable.
That makes... well, the reason I ask is that in the West, given our huge quantity of non-communicable disease, endurance pain, that kind of, all right, I'm going to have to deal with this pain for a while, is exactly the sort of pain we have to learn to deal with.
Yeah, it's very true.
So if you're looking to get good at dealing with any particular type of pain as a young person, not a child, like an adolescent, that's the sort of pain you are likely to need to know how to deal with.
Yeah, great point.
Until we sort out all of the rest of Western health.
Yeah.
We'll get there, folks. It's only season 1. Right, fine. Is there any closing statement on pain, or can I chuck you a listener question?
Yeah, chuck me a listener question.
Okay, right. This is not pain related. At least I don't think it is. I don't actually know the answer to this one. Okay, a listener says, when my grandpa used to tell off my granny for humming, she would reply, "It makes you live longer." Is there any truth in this?
That is such a great question. And it is something we did a lot of work on a couple of years ago. And when I burrowed into the humming literature, turns out there's actually more than you expect.
There's humming literature.
Yeah. So in order to explain why humming does something cool that normal breathing doesn't do, we're going to have to talk a little bit about nitric oxide. Greg, what do you know about nitric oxide in breath?
I know that nitric oxide outside of breath is a vasodilatator.
Dilator. Don't go with dilatator. It just sounds daft.
It sounds weird, doesn't it? But I'm sure it's technically correct in some places.
UK, US, English, I don't know.
Anyway, nitric oxide, NO, it acts on smooth muscle in blood vessels and causes it to relax, allowing more blood to go through those blood vessels. It dilatates those vessels. Interestingly, I know that nitric oxide in breath is an aerotransmitter. It is generated by the mucosa in the nose. It dissolves in the air that you are inhaling. It goes whoosh down the old windpipe and acts on the blood vessels in your lungs. It also acts on the smooth muscle around the airways themselves, opening up the airways, letting more air and more blood get into your lungs. That improves gas exchange. And so if you breathe in through your nose, you get better gas exchange. If you breathe in through your mouth, you miss out on the nitric oxide. You don't get that kind of whoosh down into your lungs, and you don't get the boost of gas exchange. That's all I know about nitric oxide in air.
Yeah.
Other than that, it marks out high volatile pollution.
Yes, that is also true. The other point I will make as well is it's got antimicrobial activities as well.
No way.
Yes, antibacterial and I think antifungal as well. And so what's really cool about humming is when you're kind of vibrating your sinuses and you're vibrating the air in all of the kind of holes within your head that are filled with air, you massively increase the rate at which nitric oxide ends up in the breath.
No way.
So humming increases the amount of nasal nitric oxide that gets into your breath by it's something like 10 to 15 times. It's really, really high. But my favourite thing about this is I read this case report from a guy who'd had a chronic sinus, I feel like it was a fungal infection, but I can't remember, chronic kind of rhinosinusitis problem for about 3 or 4 months. And he hummed for, I think, 2 hours a day. And I think it was about 10 days that he fixed it in. But yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He had this thing for 4 months.
Yes.
Which is, off the top of my head, 130 days.
Yes.
And he fixed it in 10 days by humming.
Yeah, and when you look at the references, you'll realise that I have got some of the numbers a little bit off. But fundamentally, had an infection for a long time, hummed ferociously for a couple of hours a day, and managed to fix it. Single case report, but one of my favourite papers.
There are powerful single case reports out there. Angus Barbieri is my favourite.
Exactly.
But
you only need for the extraordinary, you only need one example of it happening to know that it's possible.
Yeah.
And then you have to do bigger studies and you go, does this work for more people? What are the variables, whatever? But to know what is potentially possible, that's just a case report.
So are we looking at some sort of resonant gas flow out of a blind ending container? Is that is this benefit just from pumping gas out of and into sinuses?
I don't know, because I don't know whether there is a increasing the diffusion gradient at the surface of the sinus as well. So not just about moving the gas out, but actually, I don't know if that.
Do we reckon there's any sort of cellular stimulation
This
from
is
the
what
vibration?
I wonder. I'm not sure. I looked at it the last couple of years ago, and I have to say humming was a delightful red herring that I followed vigorously for a couple of days, but then actually wasn't pertinent to the main question we were asking.
So interesting. Two things on this. One, if you've ever read any of the Mad Adams series by Margaret Atwood, Oryx and Crake and all that lot, you'll know that the better humans designed by whoever it was had a they can heal wounds by humming feature engineered into them, which was, I believe, a nitric oxide linked thing. It was all about improving blood flow and improving cellular movement. That was cool. The other thing is that I think it's John Williams, the film movie score composer, was voted as most hummable. I cannot find your reference for that. It was years ago. But if you need to find 2 hours of humming music, thoroughly recommend John Williams for that.
Goodness.
If you're trying to treat fungal infections, then John Williams is your man.
Awesome.
Never thought I'd say that.
Love it. Oh, amazing.
Okay, so yeah, potentially, my dear listener, your granny was right, and humming does make you live longer. Thank you very much for talking to us today. Gwen, thank you for talking to me.
Always a pleasure.
We should try and hum our theme tune. No, very difficult. Folks, you have been listening to Growing Up Weird with me, Dr. Greg Dickens, and
me, Dr. Gwen Bradbury.
I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye.
Bye.